Hi, you're watching Floyd Steinberg's YouTube channel. The Yamaha EX5 once was Yamaha's flagship synthesizer back in the late 90s, while the Montage M8X is the current flagship synthesizer of theirs. So why don't we compare these two machines? How do 25 years of progress look on synthesizers, and are there perhaps things which were better on the old machine? If you think that's interesting, please join me in this video. Here we go. I want to start this video by comparing the two things that ultimately led me to buying the Montage: the piano sounds and the keyboard. I know that in the YouTube synth space we talk about analog synthesizers and wavetables and wavefolding and filters a lot, but let's face it, there comes a moment in your life when you just need a great sounding piano, and you need it quick, and you want to play like on a real piano. Luckily, Montage absolutely delivers here. It boots within 21 seconds and its CSX piano sounds expressive, powerful, and has exactly that depth and clarity that's useful in so many situations. There are a couple of videos on YouTube that compare the piano sounds on current high-end workstation synthesizers, and in my opinion, Yamaha's offering clearly takes the cake here. And I can assure you that the weighted wooden keyboard action built into this synthesizer feels and plays just like a real piano. Having polyphonic aftertouch doesn't hurt as well. The EX5 had an okay piano sound for its time, but even in 1997, this was not the best piano sound you could get for your money. Luckily, the 76 keys action still is one of the best in class. It's a wonderfully responsive and durable keyboard that even after 30 years works flawlessly. It has channel-wide aftertouch, which on the keyboard itself is clearly defined, so you don't accidentally use it. Both synths have metal enclosures and plastic side plates. The EX5 side plates are known to break easily, they're basically hollow. The Montage, however, looks more sturdy here, but I don't want to put this to the test. Both synths are exceptionally heavy, the EX5 weighing over 20 kilograms and the Montage M8X a cool 32 kilograms because of its keyboard. If you're a professional musician and you don't want to be forced into early retirement due to back problems, that's an important thing to consider. Let's take a look at connectivity before we talk about the actual technical advancements. Both the Montage and the EX5 have two stereo outputs, one of them freely assignable. The Montage having balanced audio outputs, which actively reduces any outside noise. These extra outputs are useful for looping in external audio devices on selected instruments. Both the Montage and the EX5 have a stereo audio input. On the EX5, this is used for sampling only. On the Montage, it's used for capturing audio in real time. It's possible to use the synthesizer's internal effects on the incoming audio. Both the EX5 and the Montage have connectors for 2-foot switches and 2-foot controllers, so you can use sustain and expression pedals to control your sounds. Both synths have headphone jacks on the back, but the EX5's optional SCSI port has been replaced by 2 USB ports, which can be used for connecting not only storage media, but other audio hardware or even external screens to mirror the Montage's display. The EX5 has 2 sets of 5-pin MIDI in, out and through ports, while the Montage has 1 of them, plus the USB connectors, which can be used for MIDI as well. The EX5 has multiple hardware expansion slots that can be used to add more audio out ports, hard drives, network adapters, more RAM and ROM. These are absent on the Montage, and I argue they aren't really needed. The Montage comes with roughly 12 GB of RAM for factory and user sounds, and it can be updated by uploading a new firmware with a USB stick. This way, Yamaha added new features, for example a shimmer reverb, to the Montage 1 year after its release. Updating the EX5 isn't quite as easy. You'll have to exchange some actual chips to install the latest firmware. The EX5 has a measly 16 MB of RAM for factory samples, and you can add another 64 MB of volatile RAM for user samples and 16 MB of flash memory to keep those samples permanently without saving them to disk, which is highly advisable because Yamaha's SCSI interface is incredibly slow on the EX5. Loading a full sample sound set from disks takes roughly 20 minutes. By the way, only 2 years after the EX5 was released, updating was way less of a hassle on the MU2000, for example, which could load firmware updates over USB. Let's take a look at the user interface now. Both the EX5 and the Montage first and foremost are synthesizers, so having some nice real-time controls is quite important. The EX5 has 1 pitch bend and 2 mod wheels and a ribbon controller for tweaking sounds. It also has 6 knobs situated under the display. These are freely assignable endless encoders. These here have been in use for nearly 30 years and they work flawlessly. How these controls are used in a patch or performance can be stored within the patch or performance settings. This is certainly enough real-time control for a good old filter sweep or dynamic LFO dubstep wobble. On the Montage, there's only 1 pitch bend and mod wheel, but the ribbon is still there, and we now have a potentiometer for controlling portamento speed. Additionally, to the 6 knobs under the display, there's now 8 knobs and 8 faders for sound control, and the super knob, which you can think of as a macro control that can tweak many synth parameters at once. All of the controls have LED indicators now, so you can immediately read the patch settings just by looking at them. This is very helpful. The idea for the super knob already exists on the EX5, by the way. Here you can store 2 scenes of a sound, each containing tweaked versions of the bass sound. If you push both scene buttons simultaneously, you can then move from one version of the sound to the other one using the second mod wheel, which is exactly what the super knob does. Both synthesizers have an astounding number of buttons as well, which can be used for selecting patches and performances and for editing sounds and performances and using the respective sequences and arpeggiators. I like the button layout on the EX5 more, as all the patch selection buttons can be used to quickly access and toggle oscillators or voices while editing. As the Montage has much more voices, I understand this wasn't an option on that synth. EX5 has a 240x64 pixels display, which just so manages to display all the important information and even some graphs. All the menus are built in such a way that there are 6 parameters you can change on the page, so you can use the 6 knobs under the screen for editing if you want to. Montage, on the other hand, has a wide VGA touchscreen and a 512x64 pixels display. The main screen is used for nearly everything you can do on this synth, while the pixel display is used for editing sounds quickly. There are multiple buttons around that display, which will let you switch through pages quickly, and it's a really great way of setting up sounds. But enough of the exterior, let's take a look at the synth engines now. EX5 was famous for coming with 4 different synth engines: AN or virtual analog, AWM2, which is sample-based subtractive synthesis, modeling synthesis or VL, and FDSP, which is kind of a mix of modeling synthesis and sample-based synthesis. With FDSP, you can do all kinds of unexpected things, for example using carpless strung synthesis or 4-operator FM synthesis or wavefolding even. All of this is a bit opaque due to Yamaha's creative naming of the FDSP algorithms like tornado, water, and so on. Each sound can use 2 insert effects and 2 global effects here. You can choose from roughly 80 effects, and there's anything there you could ask for. These effects, in my opinion, sound really good even today, especially those amp simulators. And I sang my praises on Yamaha's chorus effect elsewhere already. EX5 can play up to 120 notes at one time, but in reality that number will be significantly lower. AWM can use up to 4 parts per voice, which means if you only use sounds containing 4 parts, you're down to 32 voices. FDSP limits polyphony to 16 voices, AN to 2 voices, and VL to 1 voice. In AWM mode, additionally to the 419 internal waves, you can create waves from your own samples and use them in your AWM patches. In performance mode, you can use up to 16 different patches on 16 MIDI tracks, but only a limited number of voices can use their respective insert effects in this mode. You'll inevitably hit that DSP full error message. You can also use VL and FDSP and AN together with AWM voices, but once again, this will reduce polyphony and the amounts of effects that can be used quite dramatically. EX5 can use up to 3 filters per oscillator. Montage, on the other hand, comes with 3 sound engines. AWM2 is roughly the same as in the EX5, but instead of 4 parts, you're getting 8 parts now. And the amount of internal waves you can choose from has skyrocketed to 3632, and you'll find the waves found in the EX5 among them. You can use 2 filters and 1 equalizer per voice. FMX is a frequency modulation synth engine in the tradition of the DX7, but instead of 6 operators, there are 8 now, and one of them with feedback. ANX is a 3-oscillator virtual analog synth, but instead of 2, you get 16 voices of polyphony now. Like on the one found in the EX5, you can adjust the shape of waves fluidly, and there's frequency modulation here. There's also a wave folder and a texture editor now. One feature unique to all these synth engines is the new motion sequencer. Think of this as a user-defined LFO. You can draw partials of a curve and then arrange these partials into a 16-step sequence, changing the depth and direction of each step and the speed of the sequence overall. Polyphony on the Montage has gone up to 256 for AWM, 128 for FMX and 16 for ANX. As in the EX5, you can use up to 16 instruments simultaneously. The difference here is the synth will not restrict you in the amount of insert effects you can use at once or how many FMX or ANX voices you're going to use in the song. Like in the EX5, each voice can use 2 insert and 2 global effects, and the number of effects to choose from has increased to around 130. Montage has the super knob, which can control multiple sound parameters at the same time, allowing you to effortlessly move from one sound to another one. As I said, the idea was already there on the EX5 in scene morphing, but the super knob takes that idea and amps it up to 11. Both synthesizers come with a 16-track pattern-based sequencer. Both synthesizers have a 4-track arpeggiator, though I found the one on the Montage quite complicated to set up. If you wonder what that means, I have another video on this channel which is more in-depth. Montage is missing a step sequencer, which I found unfortunate. I'm not the fastest player in the world, and I would have liked to be able to enter sequences step by step. If you know I'm wrong here, I'd love to hear how to use the step sequencer. Please write it down in the comments. Montage doesn't really distinguish between a patch and the performance in its user interface. Instead, you'll find both in its search form. By the way, organizing and finding patches is so much better on the Montage, with a favorite system, meaningful categories, and an actual search form you can type search terms into. And of course, switching patches on the Montage won't abruptly end the patch currently played. Instead, those notes will be released softly while you can already play the next patch. Montage M supports MIDI 2.0 as of update 2.0, which means super high resolution for all MIDI values, among other things. All in all, this is the first time I had the impression that Yamaha had created a worthy successor to the EX5. If we only could get those VL and FDSP engines back now, and perhaps a step sequencer please? One thing I have to mention is that the EX5 had a 300-page printed manual, which was actually quite good, despite some people claiming the contrary. It had a good tutorial part and then went on to explain each and every function in detail, and it had a keyword index. Contrary to that, Montage comes with a 16-page overview and an online manual that leaves you wishing for more. If you try to create your own arpeggiators using that manual only, to name one example of many, good luck with that. This is a sorry state of affairs and not worthy of a premium instrument like this. If our ancestors were able to do that, then we should be able to get a good manual in 2025 as well. Yeah, and that's my comparison. Of course, there are a ton of things I didn't mention here, but with synthesizers this deep, that would have been nearly impossible to do. I hope you got an impression of both machines anyway. So, what do you think? Are the nearly 30 years of technical progress obvious here? Or do you think it could have been even better? Write it down in the comments below, and I'm looking forward to read your opinions. Yeah, and that's it for today. The Yamaha EX5 from 1997 compared to the Montage M8X, which is Yamaha's current flagship synthesizer. So if you think that was an interesting YouTube video, please do the YouTube thing. As always, thanks for watching and see you again very soon. Bye bye!